Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Heroic Efforts. Thank you for joining us once again in Season 2. I am one of your hosts, Andy Foreman, and I am sitting here with Mr. Martin Fisher.
Bon voyage.
Hello there.
And I am also sitting here with Mr. Nick Talamante.
Hey, what's happening, everybody?
And we are here during the spookiest time of the year, and I don't just mean the election season.
Oh, knee slap.
Oh, we're so fucked.
Yeah, that is exactly what we're doing today. We're following up our Dark Universe episode with, I don't even know how we would classify this, because one of these is a Universal Monster movie. One of these is a universally monstrous movie.
That's good. That's a good one.
We're trying to do basically, how did you describe this, Nick? As like, as Victorian era period bullshit or something like that?
Yeah, so I would describe this as gothic cape shit, or gothic cloak shit, I should say. This is superhero adjacent, and I'm glad that we're expanding out a little bit for the show to include this stuff because, much like we talked about in the earlier episode, superhero movies have just dominated pop culture and they've dominated so much of the film landscape, and it's more apparent now, but even back then in like the early aughts, this was the case because we had shit like the two wonderful movies we're going to be talking about today, which are basically fucking superhero films.
Mm-hmm. It's superhero IP film where you don't want to pay for the IP because it's public domain.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're talking about today when we are discussing the double feature that is Van Helsing and LXG, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, not some sort of X-Men spin-off, as they were trying to trick audiences in the early 2000s.
When you said it, LXG.
Hey, you know what?
Go ahead.
A porno would have had better special effects, but that's beside the point.
Now let's cue the Van Helsing.
But yeah, we should just jump right into it. We should set the stage a little bit for what was happening around this time because these movies came out within a year of each other, didn't they? Yeah, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is, off the top of my head, I believe it's 2003, correct?
Yes, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen came out in July 2003. And if I scroll on my phone fast enough, I can tell you that Van Helsing came out in May of 2024.
Okay, so they did come out within a year of each other. They were both intended to be
2024.
Was it 2004? 2004. Did you just see it? I think it was just in theaters.
No, because Martin works for a movie theater, so he might have some insight that we don't have about a big Van Helsing 20th anniversary re-release push by Universal Studios. That's what you were saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They were pushing that, not the 25th anniversary of The Mummy.
Exactly. But that's a great way to start this off, is to sort of give people context for what was happening at the time. The reason both of these movies exist is because The Mummy 1999 and Spider-Man 2002, and we'll include X-Men 2000 as well, were enormous successes. They really, really, really were part of that changing tide of movie blockbusters, sort of transitioning out from whatever the hell Schwarzenegger and Seagal and Stallone were doing in the early 90s, sort of into the more IP-driven, less muscle-bound action movies. It's the Batman and the Crow were, and of course, like Indiana Jones were sort of turning the tide of what action movies were going to be, and that in turn led to, at the end of the century, The Mummy and Spider-Man and X-Men.
Yes, the 21st century is marked by being the point where big action films were now more so about like, oh, hey, it's that thing I recognize, not so much, oh, it's that actor I recognize. You weren't going there for the actor, you were going there because you know the IP that they're adapting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and exactly. And speaking of IP, the biggest thing going at this time was The Lord of the Rings, which, along with The Matrix, was really revolutionizing what blockbusters would look and feel like in terms of how they incorporate special effects, the sort of grandiose budgets and scales that they were willing to give to some of these more unknown properties. just off the top of my head, I know the moment that the Matrix 3 came out, that's the one where they have like the giant Neo and Agent Smith fight in the rain, right? Where they're flying around.
Yes.
I remember hearing that when that came out, Warner Brothers executives wanted to hop on a Superman reboot just because they saw the flying effects in the Matrix.
Really?
And that was what spurred them trying to do a Superman reboot.
That's interesting.
And
And
so
when I first saw that movie, I'm like, oh my god, we can actually do a Superman movie.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It turns out we have the same thought process as people that make millions of dollars. So if anybody wants to hit us up, we can definitely help you out. But
There for you. Coincidentally, also, The Matrix and Lord of the Rings, big trendsetters for the 21st century, both movies that Sean Connery said no to. That'll be important later.
yes, exactly. Just hang on to that little
Hang on.
nugget of information. Yeah. But we should also just say that this is the last. The 2000s going into the 2010s is the last gasp of steampunk literary action films where it's these, and I'm just going to crib directly from a YouTuber, Patrick H. Willems, who did a great video on this on Public Domain superhero movies. Primarily, he talks about Robin Hood and King Arthur, but he makes some great points in it. You guys should definitely check out his video. But he made a great overarching point of there's a difference in pop culture between well-known and popular. Everybody knows who Robin Hood is, but not that many people give a shit enough to show up to a Robin Hood movie. And so that's really, these are sort of part of that dying trend where obviously the Mummy is coming off of Indiana Jones's success, and Indiana Jones clearly a pulp revival in and of itself, but some actual IPs were right before this. Wild Wild West had come out, which is like a really it's not actually that bad of a movie, but it is a really bad example of like steampunk. Then you have like The Three Musketeers came out in like 2011. They did Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes, which was initially successful. They had, two different Robin Hoods within a decade, neither of which we cared about, so on and so forth. Jonah Hex. I mean, I know that's a superhero movie, but that kind of falls into the steampunk bullshit category. So that's just, these movies were dying at this point. I think we can agree.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, it's funny that you bring that up because I think this is when Hollywood especially, but maybe even culturally, we all kind of came to the conclusion that, okay, maybe steampunk is just inherently fucking lame. You know what I mean? Like, maybe there really isn't too much you can squeeze out of this outside of very specific context. Like, we'll get into it for these films. I think you can do steampunk in an interesting way if you're doing it in this kind of period accurate setting of like late Victorian era, early, modernity. I think it can kind of work there if you have something interesting going on in the background. But if you bank it all on just kind of that steampunk aesthetic, you're just like, oh, this is really fucking lame. You know what I mean? Only like super fucking nerds are like into this specific aesthetic. And so I think we kind of get, like you say, get the last squeeze of juice out of this one.
Yeah, and also the last thing that's important to note before we dive into the movies is that along with steampunk and literary action movies dying, this came right after the more or less failed attempt to revive pulp heroes in the 90s. So you had The Rocketeer, The Shadow, The Phantom. There's one other one that I'm missing off the top. Dick Tracy was one. All movies of varying quality, but all movies that overall I like, and all movies that we're going to talk about on this show at some point. But yes, every single one of these failed to start the franchise that it intended. And it's important to remember because this is the last decade or the last time period where you could seriously look a studio executive in the eye and be like, remember that old radio show from the 40s? I think audiences are clamoring for that to come back. And so it's very much like that. And that's why we were getting Universal Monster reboots and somehow people thinking that a movie starring Alan Quartermain as the main character was going to be something. But we should just dive into it at that point because we've already teased it enough. And first off the bat is we're going to be talking about Van Helsing. I think it's only fair that Martin take us through this since this is like his favorite movie of all time.
Oh my, okay. Van Helsing is perfection It is blockbuster summer perfection. I will say that. I love this. I love this movie more than the Mummy movies. I love this more than any Dark Universe bullshit. I love this more than the Wolfman. This is my shit. When you are successfully able to incorporate Van Helsing, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, Dracula, Dracula's brides, all into this fucking hodgepodge, and then you got Igor being in the corner, like, master, that is great. And okay, I love Stephen Sommers as a director. I think he's a great popcorn filmmaker, and this is absolutely where he shines. You get fucking Hugh Jackman fresh off of the X-Men movies, just like give him a fucking trench coat, a cool ass hat, some awesome fucking weapons, and you make a badass Devil May Cry ripoff game. Oh my god.
Oh my god, dude.
This is the perfect idea.
Much like our Ghost Rider episode, this is the mark of a truly great film. When you get a DMC knockoff that's actually pretty fucking good, as the case with Ghost Rider and now with Van Helsing, you know you're doing something right.
That's right. Goddamn right. And let me tell you, I've seen this movie probably more times than I have seen probably a majority of Cape Shit, which is surprising for me because I love Cape Shit. I have probably seen this movie as many times as I have seen Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Wow.
Okay, let me just preface this with a lot of that came from when I was a kid, and I only had Spider-Man, Daredevil, Hulk, Van Helsing, and maybe Batman on VHS. So this was on the rotation all the time. If I was going to go somewhere, I brought that movie with me. So I watched it countless times. I played the video game. I've read the novelization. I have the animated prequel that they did for it. I have the Steelbook. I have the DVD. I have the regular Blu-ray. I have the 4K. Boy, howdy, I love Van Helsing.
Do you have the one-shot comic book that they published where he goes to the island of Dr. Moreau?
Well, Andy, it looks like I need to add something to my eBay cart right now.
I was doing some research on this. I was doing some research on this movie, and I did not realize that was something that that they had made. Which, even reading that, I'm like, I gotta get on this, because the Island of Dr. Moreau adaptation, Island of Lost Souls, technically counts as a Universal Monster movie.
Why is the first thing that comes up when I look Van Helsing comic book up on eBay a $225 game card for Van Helsing Invisible Woman, and it's just a lady with her tits out?
What the
that's that Zenoscope Entertainment, my friend.
Okay, there you go.
When it comes to public domain properties in comics, you got to be really careful, because it's either really great stuff like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's either nothing. Yeah, it's either nothing like attempts at reviving it, or it's just porn. Like,
well, good news is that the card grading is a 9.8, so it is in prime condition. I see it on here. Ooh, was it Van Helsing from Beneath the Rue Morgue?
It might be that one.
Okay, well, I'm going to assume it's that one. I'm adding this to the list, fellas. Oh my god. Andy, you have added to my collection. It's only $10.
Oh shit, that's awesome, dude. I'm so happy I get live on the air. Martin expanded his collection. And by the way,
Helsing heads rise up.
In case anybody wants to know why there's so much shit in both of our respective living spaces, it's because that's the mentality we have. I'm just like, wait, Van Helsing, the Rue Morgue, Dr. Moreau, I'm buying that. Like, that's the mindset that we have. But anyway, someone who doesn't have that mindset as much and is a little more objective on this should probably summarize the plot for us real quick.
Sure, because there's a lot to summarize.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I'll give my thoughts on it. Just know that I'm just like Marty. I fucking love this film, not nearly to the extent that he does, but I really enjoy it. But let's just give the audience a quick summary of what's going on with this film and why it's so great. So the film opens up with honestly a pretty banger-ass intro in 1887 in Transylvania. And we have basically the entire ending sequence of Frankenstein. So we have Dr. Frankenstein, and he, along with Igor, is, turning on Frankenstein's monster, like just having the lightning bolts, crackle and everything like that, and giving life to his creation. But with the twist in this film, he is also joined by Count Dracula. And Count Dracula, by the way, is played honestly incredibly by Richard Roxburgh.
Hell yeah.
He is fucking fantastic in this. He is
Rocks.
chewing the scene. Just absolutely chewing the scene on this one. Exactly. The incredible rocks. So anyway, we have the end of Frankenstein's monster basically playing out, and the villagers are attacking Castle Frankenstein. They're trying to storm it and destroy the unholiness that's going on right now.
Wait, hold up, Nick. I think you need to do this justice. So while you're doing this, I'm going to be playing this in the background. So,
oh, there we go. Set the tone, set the atmosphere.
Get going.
So we're in Transylvania. Villagers are storming Castle Frankenstein. And all the while, Dr. Frankenstein's having an existential crisis because he's just created life. Unfortunately, that was the entire purpose of Count Dracula funding his whole operation, because Count Dracula wants to show that he can defy God himself and create life as well. And when Dr. Frankenstein learns of this evil, he says, "No, sir, he's killed." And then Frankenstein's monster takes him, escapes, runs to the windmill, and the villagers storm it. And Frankenstein gives out a bellowing, "Why?" And then the villagers burn that shit to the ground. And then Count Dracula, a little pissed that his investment just got burned up in flames by a bunch of fucking yodels in Transylvania, he fucks off to his castle. That same time, we are in Paris, and we are in Notre Dame, and we have a mysterious and badass-looking Hugh Jackman hunting down Mr. Hyde, who we will also feature in the next movie we talk about. But basically, after having exactly, instead of having basically. Jackman shows up and he looks like, honestly, really, really sick. I love his design. But he shows up, he has a big fight with Mr. Hyde / Dr. Jekyll, fucks him up, and then at the very end of it, we see Hyde turn back into Jekyll, and everyone looks up at Van Helsing on top, and they're just like, "Murderer!" And that becomes a big part of his whole character arc. Anyway, fast forward, the Vatican, he's confessing his sins, and we get introduced to the secret society of, these all religious figures basically around the world, all coming together for a secret society and secret army that Van Helsing is, a part of, and they're tasking him with the goal of going to Transylvania and stopping a great evil that is emerging over there, because we have the Valerius siblings, and they are part of a long line of family who are hunting vampires and specifically trying to kill Dracula, and their ancestor made an oath that they would never see the gates of heaven until they defeat Dracula. Well, they've been getting bodied and murked for about 450 years, so it's not going well. These are the last of the descendants, and basically the Vatican's like, "Yo, we need to save like all of these people. So like, if you can go over there and like fuck some shit up, that'd be great." So we have Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing. He takes with him his funny little friar, Carl. He suits up in a bunch of Acme-ass steampunk weapons. They go to Transylvania, and after a initially rocky confrontation with the yodels and the villagers, they start fighting a few of Dracula's brides, and then that's when the werewolf comes into town and also starts attacking them. We lose the brother Valerius. He becomes a werewolf, and then that's when the remaining Valerius sibling and Van Helsing must find a way to save her brother and find a way to defeat Dracula. So they start, going through all these ancient kind of tomes and finding this mystery. All the while, at some point, they come to encounter Dracula and his children, and that becomes the whole impetus of it. Dracula's trying to create life. He's trying to use Frankenstein and the creation of life to give birth to all his children permanently. And he has thousands of these weird, bat demon babies, and he's going to unleash them onto the world. So eventually, Frankenstein defeats the werewolf, but in the process becomes a werewolf himself. And then at the same time, they also find Frankenstein's monster. And so after everything kind of goes to shit for a second, Van Helsing's infected, Frankenstein's monster gets captured, the Valerius sibling gets captured. They eventually come up with some way to, infiltrate Dracula's secret castle inside of a mirror world in the Antarctic. Once they do, they go there, and then they discover that the one thing that can kill Dracula is, and I love this part, it's Van Helsing turned into a fucking werewolf, and they just have a big monster fight. So eventually they have their big monster fight, and Frankenstein's monster is saved. He gets to fuck off somewhere, but in the process, and in that great tragedy, even though Frankenstein rips out Dracula's throat, defeats the king.
Wait, let me get to the high part real quick.
I was gonna say, I can't hear shit on my end. It might just be for you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm okay with
He's in his own world. He's in his own world. So finally, we get to the big fight. Count Dracula, the son of Satan himself, he fights Van Helsing, who turned to a big fuck off werewolf, and then they go to monster fight, and then werewolf Van Helsing rips out his throat. In the process, he accidentally kills the last Valerius sibling, and thankfully, though, in the meantime, he killed Dracula. So we get to the final ending, and Van Helsing looks up into the sky, and he sees 450 years worth of family go up into heaven, finally ascending into the pearly gates, because they're like, thank God. It's so beautiful, and I bet you every single one of them was like, thank fucking God, dude, because we were like really fucked. Like, you actually killed like our last descendant, so if you didn't get him in the end, we'd all be in hell. So thanks, dude. And then Frankenstein's monster is just like, cool, fuck this, I'm out. And then he like goes on a little boat, and then that was Van Helsing. And wow, what an incredible film.
What a fantastic fucking cinematic masterpiece.
It's so fucking complicated.
It is very complicated.
It's so complicated. Like,
but it works. Here's the thing.
Yes, absolutely. Go for it, Nick.
I was just gonna say, so like, if I can glaze up this film for a little bit, I really, really enjoyed this film. I've only seen it maybe once or twice, like back in the day in the early aughts when it first came out, and I remember like liking it, but it just kind of, there was too much going on for me, and I just wasn't really paying attention. Upon this rewatch, this film is just oozing, just dripping with sauce. I really, really enjoy it. It's very kind of similar to Spider-Man 3, not just because it's like cape shit, but it's also there's a lot going on, but it somehow manages to make a pretty coherent story with it. You know what I mean? Not saying it's like 10 out of fucking 10, but the fact that they threw in, like Marty said, all of these stuff, because you have everything from fucking Dracula, Dracula's brides, werewolves, Van Helsing, the fucking Drugar, goddamn Igor, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You're throwing in all this shit, and they're able to tell at least story you can follow throughout the entire thing. So I really, really enjoyed it. I loved how much just like pulpy fucking gothic nonsense they were able to pack into here. And also this film, I think it's best enjoyed if you just treat it kind of like theater. It's over the top. If you try to look at it like a serious movie in any kind of way, if you look at it like a serious movie, it will fucking fail on its face. But if you treat this like the way that the actors do in this, where they're just over the top, they are bombastic, they are overly dramatic, and it is just so much like, I love it. It is so just almost camp, if you will. You know what I mean? It is just so overly dramatic and melodramatic that it's a fun time. Like I said, Count Dracula chews up the scene every time he's on screen, and I just really, really loved it.
Have you no heart? No.
No. Like, it's so good. It's so fucking good, dude. Also, I will say one last point. I love the production on this. The sets are fantastic. Costume designs are great. And as any hallmark of a good movie, there's some Acme ass fucking weapons in this, dude. Van Helsing's kit is so sick. It's so stupid and steampunk, but it works because this film is just a dumb fun ride.
It is fantastic. I love the production design of this. I'm so happy you brought that up, because like so many of those sets, people don't remember what that's like. They built that shit. A lot of that shit.
Real fucking movie.
Real fucking movie. That little village or whatever, Dracula's lair on the inside, it's there. God. You can touch it. It's
all the fucking technologies, like Dr. Frankenstein stuff, all the electrical bits and bobs, and then the best hallmark of a good gothic film, they throw fucking cobwebs everywhere.
Oh my God, there's so many fucking cobwebs in the damn movie. You know how they were able to do this? This movie cost $170 million in 2004, which is the equivalent of $288 million today.
On a Van Helsing movie.
On a Van Helsing movie.
I was gonna say, could you imagine them spending a ton of, like, way too much money on a Universal monster movie? Oh, it's called The Mummy 2017.
Yeah.
Sorry. But it's called The Wolfman 2010. Okay. Okay, so when I said that, like, it's so complicated, I didn't even mean that really as an insult, because Stephen Sommers directed this, who directed The Mummy 1999, which pretty much started this whole Universal Monsters mini revival that came out in the 2000s. We can talk about that a little bit in a second. But Stephen Sommers said that his primary influence for this movie was James Bond, particularly in terms of the structure and the action and all that kind of stuff. And as you guys were, as Nick is describing this incredibly complex, hard to follow plot, I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, well, James Bond movies never make any sense either. Yeah. And then James Bond movies, as long as you are entertained by what's on the screen in front of your face at that moment, That's fine. That's all that you need from those movies. It doesn't matter if you know why he's going to Istanbul to fight this guy in this hotel room, and then he's flying to China to find this microchip. Who cares? As long as you're enjoying it, that's all that matters. Same with Van Helsing, and that's where the big production budget comes in, and where the big, bombastic nature of it comes in. It doesn't fucking matter what's happening in the movie, because as long as you're seeing giant Jacob's ladders with electricity and the Frankenstein monster and the Wolfman fighting and all this stuff, and you're enjoying yourself, that's all that matters. Who cares who cares what jewel they're looking for that's going to re-spark the... Oh wait, that's the Mummy 2017. Never mind. But
I'm glad you bring that up, because this movie is definitely despite the fact that it's set in like London and in parts of Europe, it feels like a globe-trotting kind of film almost, because you go from him fighting Mr. Hyde to him, coming to the little village, to Dracula's lair, to that weird like church cathedral thing or whatever, that party zone that's happening, the empty roads of the area around them where they get ambushed by the fucking werewolf and all that. It's like there's a lot of like huge memorable set pieces that all feel distinct from each other. There's no like fucking gray fucking battlefield where you can't distinguish one character from another. It is, every area has character to it.
Which is in stark contrast, honestly, to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, as we'll get to later, because that one is like intentionally supposed to be like a globe-trotting adventure, and you don't feel a fucking fraction of the adventure that you do in like this film. Like this film feels so distinct in each locale and each scene. That's one of the aspects I really, really enjoyed about it. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the production. I didn't know they spent a fucking bag like that on this movie. That's kind of insane for like a Van Helsing movie. I don't know whose dick they had to suck to get that approved, but I'm glad they did, because I love the production on this. Like I love a movie-ass movie, you know what I mean? And this is truly one of those where all these sets are fucking real, like for the most part, right? Obviously, like there's some parts that are like CGI, but like for the most part, it's all... Yeah, exactly. As much as I wish they did that evil fucking Hungarian, but like I really enjoyed that like every set feels so real, because a lot of it was built. It's actually built. And then when they do have CGI, it's just to kind of enhance the scale of it. Like when they're in Count Dracula's like castle and they see all those weird ball sack egg sack things full of his kids, like you get the, obviously there's like a fucking billion of them, but like you get that for the sense of scale. But everything else on the ground level where the actors are on screen, it's like that's a real set with all the rubble and the cobwebs and all that shit. So I really, really enjoyed that this film feels like a whole ass adventure, which you would hope out of, like, if you're going to take 2 hours and 20 minutes of my time, make it all worth it. And much to Andy's point, now that he had mentioned that that's where the director's inspiration came from for James Bond, you're like, yeah, it doesn't fucking matter like why they're going after the MacGuffin. I really don't need to know why, as long as everything, every step of the way to that MacGuffin, as long as that's interesting and captivating like it is in this film, then I think, do whatever the fuck you want.
Let me just say, you are not going to get a PG-13 action adventure movie like this again. There's not going to be any. Van Helsing is uniquely its own, right down to you having like white vampire ladies with their tits out. Like you're not going to get that in any other movie. It's never going to happen again. I love how unique it is. Oh, can we talk about the
character design?
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought
we can talk about the brides, brother, man. We can talk about the brides. I can talk all day about them ladies. But I really want to talk about the character design. So let me throw it to you guys real quick. How do you guys feel about like the character designs that were on the topic of like production?
Fantastic.
Okay, I have a mixed opinion on this.
That's okay.
It's mostly fantastic. I'll start off with the positives. This is the best modern Frankenstein monster that they've ever done. It looks so good. The fact that he has like that plastic glass chamber that his exposed heart is in, and you can see that green thing beating inside his chest. It looks so cool. This Frankenstein monster is incredible. Whoever, I forget the actor's name that plays him, but he is so good.
Yes.
So good.
Let me look it up real quick. I have the cast in front of me. It's a Mr. Shirler Hensley.
Okay, because congratulations, sir. You pulled it off. Because this is a very, very, very faithful but modern version of the Boris Karloff design. Because it's got the flat top, it's got the bolts in the neck, it's got the scars, all that good stuff. But they didn't just replicate it, but also look great.
Interesting thing to note, he is mostly a stage actor, which I think definitely informs his performance in the movie, because he is very grand in the movie.
I was going to bring that part up too, but just to close the part on his design, as we can talk about in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which we'll get to, it would have been so tempting for them to turn the Frankenstein monster into like the Incredible Hulk, particularly at this time when people were just using CGI left and right. I commend the fact that they used practical effects for him. I love the grandiosity of his performance. I don't remember what he's saying off the top of my head, but when they're taking him like there's like a bunch of people carrying the Frankenstein monster, and he's like shouting like, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
It's
like,
Dracula's little henchman carrying him away.
It's the Drugar.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the Frankenstein monster, upon gaining like sentience and having some sort of like mild amount of education, of course he would be incredibly religious based on how he came into the world and how he has to see the world. So that's a great character.
And I will just add real quick, I love that the first thing he says in the movie is the big boisterous "why" after they kill Frankenstein. I love that. That's great.
It's so great. But speaking of the practical effects, on the other side of that,
don't you dare.
No, where do you think I'm going?
Who are you talking about? Are you talking about Mr. Hyde?
No, I was gonna talk about the werewolf, the Wolfman.
Okay.
I feel that the CGI on the Wolfman is fairly weak. It looks a lot like the werewolf from like the first Jack Black Goosebumps movie.
It does, yes.
I get what they're going for, but having said that, if you had like, and this is a tall order, but if you had a like Rick Baker level makeup from the Wolfman 2010 for the werewolf in this, this movie automatically goes up like another tier. Because could you imagine that practical Frankenstein versus that practical werewolf? Holy shit. And again, like the Hulk, there was that temptation to make this CGI, and I don't think that benefits the movie overall because it's aged quite poorly.
Yes, the CGI on the werewolf has definitely aged poorly. I quite enjoyed the design simply because I like me some I like the Wolfman kind of thing, but I also like big beastie werewolves. Now, having said that, physically speaking, the Underworld films did that very well. In the first couple of movies, they did physical werewolf that are like monster werewolves. So I feel like they could have done that and then saved some of the more insane stunts that they had to do with it for CG. At the same time, I've noticed that like the fucking werewolves, both the versions, the Van Helsing one and then the brother in this movie, are fucking massive. They're like 9 feet tall. Yeah. So I'm not sure if maybe that had an impact on what they decided to go with design-wise, where they're like, we need this to be a big hulking beast.
I mean, like, look at it. It looks like fucking Fruit Brute. Like,
Andy
is currently showing us a face picture of the werewolf.
No, Andy, he looks like a wolf. You fucking Wolfman Puritan.
I'm just saying, the werewolves are one of the monsters in cinema that have the most stellar reputation for practical effects, whether it's Jack Pierce's makeup or The Howling or American Werewolf in London, all the way to Rick Baker's work on The Wolf Man in 2010. And it's just such a shame to see a character that is so rooted in practical effects just be made into a CGI like rubber monster that was out of date by like 2008, 2009. You know, and again, within the decade, they did Benicio del Toro's Wolfman, which blows this out of the water in every way. And having said that, though, the werewolf is really, because the Wolfman is one of my favorite Universal monsters of all time. He's one of my favorite. Yeah, and I think this movie really lets the Wolfman down in general by making him be like part of the siblings. I mean, do they even say he's Larry Talbot? Do they even say that?
No, because he's the brother of Kate Beckinsale. Is it Kate Beckinsale or is it the other one?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
There's two actresses from that time period I always mold in my head together. Yeah, so he's Kate Beckinsale's brother. They're from that whole fucking lineage. So no, it's not Larry Talbot. And I do agree with you because I do think the werewolf is put into a more of a subservient position, not so much a proactive position. And you can do that very well. The Underworld movies, again, do that very well. That's a whole plot point in the third one. I feel like you could do something like that, but that he's kind of more so just a plot device, and also to get to a point where we can give Van Helsing a cool werewolf power at the end of the movie.
Yeah, and
He's a glorified goon.
Yes.
Yeah,
not that kind of goon.
I was gonna say the Benicio del Toro Wolfman is definitely a goon. Like
yes, yes.
that Larry Talbot definitely locks his door every night. We talked about that. He's done terrible things.
He's done terrible things. I will say one thing I do like around the Wolfman is I love Igor's hatred for the werewolf constantly, where he's constantly torturing him. And I love the part where Dracula's like, Igor, why do you torture that monster so? And he goes like, because it's what I do. And then he goes,
Igor is so good in this.
So good. He goes, Igor, do unto others before they do unto me. I love it.
Yes. Oh, it's so good.
And I like the Igor design, so.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
most of it is great. Sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say. I'll let you guys finish your point. I was gonna say about Igor. I just love that between like Igor and the like the Drugar. I just love Dracula's penchant for hiring like evil like Hungarian imps.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what it is, but he's just like everyone from this country is just a tiny little devil person, and I need all of them in my employment.
Like the top hat guy at the fucking village who gets like thrown into the fucking like the gravesite.
Oh, he's so good.
Yeah.
I got to give him his due. We got to talk about that scene in a second. But Andy, please, continue with what you're saying about.
I think we're going through
like,
designs and everything. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, the only other thing I wish Dracula would have had a little bit more uniqueness to him. Dracula, he's obviously, the actor's great, but it just feels very like Spirit Halloween Dracula, like just like some leathery robes,
sexy
and like
Dracula. Thank you very much. Okay,
I know.
They took Richard Roxburgh's beautiful blonde hair and dyed it like a oily black. He kind of looks like the watery guy from Ghost Rider 1, Yeah,
he does.
Well, okay, the more we talk about this, the more we're like, all these fucking things look the same from this fucking era of movies. It's like they're all pulling from the same, like, they're all pulling from the same, like, Weta Workshop fucking concept art. Like, it's overall, no, this movie is like 80% fantastic as far as its designs go. Yeah. It's just the fact that the werewolf is... The fact that the werewolf is a genuine disappointment, at least for me, the way he looks, and Dracula is not that unique in his look, given that he's like the villain of the movie, is unfortunate. Okay, you know what? If you took fucking Nicolas Cage's design from Renfield and just sort of altered it a little bit, and you took fucking Benicio del Toro's Wolfman and put them in there, holy shit. Like, automatic fucking Kino, like, platinum tier.
Fair. Yeah. But I will say, design-wise, I think one of the tippity top ones I do think is Dracula's Brides. The design work on them is fantastic. Their outfits are so fucking great, and the fact that they start to like kind of do their Wonder Woman spin, and their clothing kind of turns into part of their skin, and then they become like that vampiric form that's got their titties out. That is amazing, and I will say, like the deathly pale white skin reflecting on that Hungarian fucking cloudy day is so fucking great.
Yes, and also, dude. Like, I adore the fact that when the Wolfman changes, he tears his skin off.
Yes,
like, that's a cool design.
I on that specific note, Andy, I was just gonna say, one, overall, I tend to agree with Andy on like the Wolfman stuff. I think it's pretty disappointing. It definitely gives Spirit Halloween vibes, especially that face. And I really don't love that it's all CGI. I get it, to Marty's point, if they wanted to have these like huge bulking like beasts, then I guess that's why they did it, but I'm not a big fan of the design. However, I'll say I think it's not great design, but I think it's animated beautifully, if that makes sense. Like, I think the animations of the Wolfman are like, I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, these motherfuckers are ferocious. They like really nailed, I think, the animation of it. The CGI looks like dog shit, but like the animation, like how they actually move, I think is really great. And I love that they pulled from folklore, like the kind of like original, at least like from that specific part of like Europe, folklore of the Wolfmen, where they like their furs underneath their skin and they tear off their skin as their like new wolf body grows underneath it. I thought that was so sick. It looked fantastic. on the point of the Dracula's Brides, they were amazing. The ladies' performances themselves, a little bit left to be desired.
Yeah, fantastic. They were chewing that cedar as much as Mr. Roxborough.
Let me clarify. In certain moments, it's a little hokey when they're just having like the dialogue, like one-to-one dialogue. But when they give like they're like they're falling over themselves or they're undulating for him and they're screaming in agony, that's fantastic. Those ladies absolutely killed it there. Design-wise,
Ooh. Growing up, I had a huge fucking crush on the redhead in this one, and
who didn't?
But like, I love her fucking lines throughout the movie where she's like, she constantly has like that back and forth with Kate Beckinsale's character throughout. Like, she just fucking hates her basically. And I love that part where she's just like, "You'll go when I say you'll go, and I'll say you'll go when you're dead," and her face is all fucking melted.
Yeah, that was pretty great. I think overall when they're giving their big bombastic performances, that's fantastic. Their design is incredible. I love their like belly dancer look because of course they're his as much as quote unquote brides, they are his concubines. You know what I mean? So they have that sexiness built into it, and when they turn into and then the robes, like the flowing robes that are always like draping behind them like wings. You know what I mean? And then they turn into the wings for that killer design with the pale white skin and everything, like these demonic like succubi flying through the air. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. To Andy's point, Frankenstein looks fan-fucking-tastic. I love how he's so jumbled up and like made of like kind of like cyborg mechanical parts as well, with his fucking brain and his heart in these like glowing glass chambers. Van Helsing looks so sick when he's not a wolf though. Like he looks so sick. I wish they would have done more with his with the mask up. I understand it's Hugh Jackman's like face. You got to show off that $1 million face, but like him when you first see him when he's fighting Mr. Hyde, and he has that cool ass like almost like bandana covering his face, like kind of scarf, and it has the eye design on it. He looks so sick. It looks like he's straight out of fucking Bloodborne. You know what I mean? It looks so fucking dope. The only thing I don't like Andy said, is the Wolfmen and Dracula himself. I don't think they look great, both from a costume and the CGI monster forms. I don't think they look fantastic. And lastly, I'll say the Drugar, the little like evil Hungarian imps. I love them. I love the weird ass like miner design that they have going on with the gas masks and everything like that. They are so fucking sick. But yeah, love it. This film, Kino,
and stuff, and they're going, no. It's great.
So
I love
good.
that shit. I love that shit. And I'll go to bat for this one just because it wasn't brought up. Aged CGI aside, I like Mr. Hyde in this. I think he's a fun little
way
villain.
Better.
Yes, way better than
way better. Well, hold that thought though, because we'll get back to that with the Leave It Short.
At the end of this episode, we're going to compare the 3 modern Mr. Hydes.
I'm so down. I'm so down. Don't forget that. Don't forget that.
I love the cigar chopping where he's just like, "It's Mr. Hyde now."
So good. Well, so good.
Since we've spent the last half hour just talking about how great this movie is and how it didn't get the attention it deserved at the time, we should probably talk a little bit about why do we think this didn't resonate with audiences at the time? Because if the Mummy 1999 is as successful as it is, why is it that Van Helsing is not quite as well remembered or wasn't as well received at the time? I have my own theories, but let's hear your guys's.
I have a financial theory for you right now.
They spent $300 million on it.
$300 million on it and expected like a big return from that. Also, the release date, while it sounds great on paper, was crowded as fuck because while it opened at number 1, what came out the next week? Troy, which made $500 million. What came out the week after that? Shrek 2, which made $928 million. What came out after Shrek 2? Everybody, if I can pull it up real quick. Not Shrek 2 again.
Spider-Man 2? Spider-Man 2 was coming later that summer.
It's The Day After Tomorrow, which somehow also made $552 million. So the issue on the financial level is that they released the movie in a way too crowded May release, and it got buried because it was the first one to come out, and then fucking you have Troy, Shrek 2, Day After Tomorrow, all these fucking movies that looking back on now made just a shit ton of money, made like $2 billion combined together, just those 3 movies alone. So it kind of got lost in the shuffle. I do think this was a point where the Universal monster thing was like, oh, we like The Mummy, we'll go see The Mummy, but I don't know if we're going to go see like Dracula. He's in a little old hat. You know, what sold the Underworld movies at the time is that they were lower budget. They were like $50 million movies at the time.
Yeah.
So they could afford that, making just not as much. This movie was supposed to be the big one. This was supposed to make whatever the equivalent of $1 billion in the 2010s would have been at that point for a movie. So I just don't think the hunger for a Van Helsing movie was there. The name doesn't carry any semblance of power to audiences because they're like, who the fuck is Van Helsing? Unless you know Dracula.
Yeah.
Because people know Dracula. People don't know Van Helsing as much as they know Dracula. And even Dracula can't do well in today's market. So
they should have just called it Dracula versus Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. Like it's the dumbest title imaginable, but at least it sells the point.
Just lay all your cards out.
Or just, call it Mad Monster Party. Like, fuck it. Like,
just the Monster Mash.
The Monster Mash,
yeah.
And I do think this is it's so funny looking back at this stuff now, because, obviously this movie is critically torn up. And it's funny to look back at that and be like, oh, this is the critically reviled blockbuster of the era. Because I'm like, where they have, like, these amazing practical sets. They have, fucking fun as fuck performances. They feel like summertime. And I'm like, this is, like, past like what is considered a great summer blockbuster now. You know what I mean? It's like what we could traditionally consider a really good blockbuster. I feel like that would fill the void for what it is now. The fact they have practical sets alone would set it above so many other movies. So it's kind of funny thinking about, like, man, we're kind of spoiled in certain respects when it came to movies that were coming out at that period for blockbuster cinema. And I miss it. And unfortunately, it was just a time where, the big IP was starting to rise. What was coming over the horizon was the superhero. Those were the IP that people were starting to crowd towards, and no one's going to Van Helsing. Like, a good chunk of people did. It still made like $300 million, off of 170 budget. So, like, it probably made money at the end of its run, especially when you consider how major and important the home video market was in the
This made a ton of money on home video. Because this was everywhere on home video. Yeah.
I was going to say, I in my little research on this, it made a fuck ton of money in DVD sales. So this has definitely, like, achieved some kind of cult status, even though it failed at the box office.
You couldn't go to a Ralph's or a Stater Brothers or an Albertsons and check out without seeing one of these priced at $24.99 on the fucking on the shelf. But it's Universal clearly planned on this being big, because I have here the notes. They were planning on a spin-off TV show called Transylvania, and they even were so sure of a sequel that they paid to keep particular sets from this movie built instead of tearing them down, which is so unfortunate, because can you imagine, like, a 2006, 2007 era Van Helsing 2, where they bring in maybe Arnold Vosloo's Mummy, and they maybe bring in the creature from the Black Lagoon and the Invisible Man? Oh my god.
Yeah. And you know what would have been even cooler? If they kept those fucking sets at, like, Universal Studios so you can actually walk on the fucking Dracula lair. You motherfuckers. How dare you take that from me?
Oh, man.
I will just say this. As a Universal Monsters fan, I don't think it's ever going to get better than this time. And I'm not saying that because I was a little kid, but also because this was the last time that Universal really pushed the monsters. And I don't mean just in Van Helsing. Right here, I have a collection of the Legacy Collection DVDs that they put out at the time. Every single one of those has multiple special features on it of Stephen Sommers talking about his love of each individual monster and talking about his thought process behind his version of it in Van Helsing. This wasn't just, the Universal Monsters are coming out, or we're going to do this, we're going to, put these back out on DVD. Like, you see it at Walmart now every Halloween, they put out, like, the Legacy Collection. No. This was, like, they were pushing it as a huge IP. There were Burger King toys of the Universal Monsters, not Van Helsing, of, like, Bela Lugosi's Dracula. There were, Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I remember from that period specifically, just because they played that commercial all the fucking time around this period, was for the Legacy Monster, the Universal Legacy Monsters collection. You could call this phone number now and order your Frankenstein Legacy collection. They would play this commercial for it constantly. It was like $24.99 for Wolfman or Frankenstein. It was such a great, like, VHS scratchy trailer commercial for this. It's always on TV. And this was a very huge period for the Universal Monster revival. And I'm sure it's because they were coming off of the high of the Mummy movies, because Mummy did well. Mummy Returns did well. They were building all the rides up and everything. It was a good time to be a Monsters fan and to have that. and it's unfortunate that like obviously that could only last for so long and be maintained for so long until it all came crashing down. But I'm grateful that we got a movie like Van Helsing, which feels like, even if you don't particularly love this movie or you don't even really like it, I think it's hard to say that it is not absolutely a celebration of the Universal monsters.
Yes, and I will say this as well. This era kept the Universal monsters alive in a big, big way. Because we could go on and on and on about all the different stuff in the 90s and the early 2000s that featured the Universal monsters. But instead of doing that, I will just direct you all to James Rolfe's Monster Madness on Cinemassacre, where he talks about all this stuff. And you can look at his old Nerd Room tours where he shows all the VHS tape collections that Universal had put out. It was huge. There was Blockbuster commercials. There were like Milky Way commercials with the Frankenstein monster. They were really trying to keep these in the zeitgeist, and for the most part I think they succeeded, because now you have people looking at Van Helsing as a cult movie. So even though the Universal monsters have struggled since, I think this did a huge I think this did a great job of keeping their legacy alive and their place in pop culture alive until more things like Lee Wannell's Invisible Man and Wolfman could come along almost 2 decades later. So having said that, we love the Universal monsters. We love Van Helsing. Thank you for keeping the Universal monsters alive. Guaranteed Kino. 100%. Certified Kino.
If you have not watched it recently, I beg of you to check it out again. You might feel a little differently than you did back in the day. You might yearn for a movie like this again.
Let me set the stage for you. Oh, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to finish it off with this nice little capstone. In case you think that, Marty is just a, faithfully blind zealot and you don't trust a word he says because he's just too deep in the sauce when this movie, I will say as like a barometer and just as a kind of second opinion on it, he's absolutely right. I was in the same boat. I had not seen this movie since it first came out when I was a kid, and I had just kind of like whatever feelings towards it. My memory of it was just very shaky, and I just kind of thinking like, oh, it was okay, right? No, upon this rewatch, and as someone who is a quintessential example of what Marty's talking about, like I did yearn for this movie. When I finally rewatched it, I was like, oh, this is incredible. You know what I mean? Again, if you go into it with the mindset and the expectation this is like a big ass, campy, overly dramatic, kind of theater production, it's fan-fucking-tastic. It is such a good time. It is such a great movie. There's so much it does right that you don't get a lot out of movies anymore, especially with these iconic monsters all in one beautiful, a little sometimes messy, but beautiful film overall. So highly, highly recommend. If you haven't seen it, please give it a second watch. I promise you'll feel a little bit differently about it.
This is the natural conclusion to what had been building up in the 90s with Coppola's Dracula, Branagh's Frankenstein, the Mike Nichols, Jack Nicholson Wolf movie, obviously The Mummy. It's just a shame. Hollow Man, you could even throw in there if you wanted to. It's a shame there was no Creature from the Black Lagoon from that era. Yeah. But regardless, this is the logical, natural endpoint to that sort of modern, but yet still theatrical Gothic revival of the Universal monsters. Let me just set the stage for you guys. If anybody really wants to rewatch this movie, wait until October. Get yourself a Blu-ray, find it streaming, okay? Put your phone away. Don't be going on your phone scrolling Twitter. Just find a crisp fall October night. Everything's still. Put on a jack-o'-lantern, turn out the lights, make yourself some popcorn, get some, Reese's Pieces, turn out all the lights, put this on, and just enjoy a spooky time as you hear the fall atmosphere outside. That is how this movie is meant to be watched, because it is a spooky, fun time.
And I will say, please, Hollywood casting agents, please hire Kevin J. O'Connor again. I miss him so very much. He played Benny in The Mummy and Igor in this, and he was also in Stephen Sommers' Deep Rising. Since Stephen Sommers is not employed anymore, apparently, with any movie, please hire him. He's fucking great. I love him in everything. He's a great little creepy wet man. So,
but while we're at it, because we have to move on. But while we're at it, you're making a G.I. Joe Transformers movie. Just get Stephen Sommers to make the damn thing.
Oh my God, please.
Just bring him out of director's jail.
Get Richard Roxburgh to play one of the evil Transformers this time around.
Exactly.
Or make
But
him
having
Cobra
said
Commander.
that, why not?
Why not?
Having said that, we can delay it no longer, gentlemen.
Is it time to talk about the other Richard Roxburgh film tonight?
Indeed it is, my friend. We can delay it no longer. It's like a dentist appointment. We just have to go. We have to do this. We need to talk about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yay.
Yeah. This movie came out roughly a year before Van Helsing.
Quartermain, I'm scarred, not blind.
Yeah.
It's amazing I remember anything from this movie, like any quotes.
Well, let me just throw this out there to start it off. It's directed by Stephen Norrington, who you will remember from Blade, which we have talked about. We have nothing but great things to say about Stephen Norrington, so that has nothing to do with what I'm about to say. This is no referendum on him as a director, but it's directed by Stephen Norrington of the Blade fame, and James Dale Robinson, who is a writer for multiple DC and Marvel comics. It's worth noting that neither has worked on a movie since this movie came out, and it's been 21 years. So, and having said that, the guy who directed it directed Blade, so he's clearly talented. So the fact that neither of them have worked on a movie shows what a disaster this thing is. We could get into all that, but I think you'll realize what a disaster is when we go through Nick's summary of this plot. I'm doing that in question mark?
Yeah. This one is okay, so let's just kind of try to get this through this quickly. So basically, the film opens up with a bank robbery in London at the turn of the 20th century. This is the late 1800s, the end of the Victorian era. The bank is being robbed by an armored tank and men with body plate armor and automatic rifles, and which is technology that is like hyper advanced for the time. You know, this is still like motherfucker, had muskets not too long ago. You know what I mean? So basically, after the robbery, an envoy from the British Crown is sent to Kenya to find the legendary hunter and adventurer Alan Quarterman, played by the late great Sean Connery. The agent asks Alan to join his specialized task force of extraordinary individuals to take down the mysterious terror group who's planning on using all this advanced tech to start, if you can believe it, gentlemen, a world war. Thank God that definitely didn't happen. So at first, Alan is disinterested, tells him to fuck off, but then they're attacked, and he's like, all right, fuck it, I guess I'll join. So the team is starting to be put together, and it's going to consist of Alan Quartermain. How do you fucking say his name?
Quartermain.
Yeah, Alan Quartermain. So the group consists of Alan Quartermain, Mina Harker, the vampiric chemist, the Invisible Man, Captain Nimoy, Dorian Gray, and Dr. Jekyll / Mr. Hyde. And as you've noticed,
I hoped I'd get to nail you one more time.
Indeed, Dorian. So as you notice, these are all figures from like literature. Basically, these are all like Victorian era protagonists and heroes and whatnot. And together they form the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Da, da, da.
So the group is tasked by the mysterious figure only known as M to hunt down the terrorist / war profiteer MF Doom, aka Victor Von Doom, aka the Phantom. And we'll get to his character design.
It's not the Billy Zane Phantom either.
Oh, sadly.
We'll get to it, but basically they got to take down the Phantom. He's going to start World War I. So after getting together, they encounter the Phantom, and a fight breaks out. And in the process, they pick up American agent Mr. Tom Sawyer. If that sounds familiar to you. So
someone's gonna drop that Rush song in. Nick, you gotta drop that Rush song in.
I'll make sure I include it in the cut.
Yeah.
So after picking up young Tom Sawyer, the group discovers that there's a plot by Phantom that he's going to blow up Venice. He's going to fucking sink the city. So they go over there, and then after a whole car chase sequence ensues, they eventually manage to stop the explosion and save what remains of the city. The whole time they suspect that Skinner, the Invisible Man, had betrayed them because he just kind of disappeared before Venice, and there's all this suspicious and sussy shit happening, you know? So then it turns out, nope, it actually wasn't Skinner. It turns out it was actually Dorian Gray who's the traitor. And after the team receives a record that plays on it, it shows that Dorian Gray and M, who we now is revealed to be an actual, villain. He turns out to be the what is it?
James Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, James Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes.
Ooh, yeah. And it's not even the cool what's his name? Jared Harris Moriarty from
It's Richard Roxburgh though.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's starting to get into real Marvel shit of them just dropping fucking names and expecting people to be like, oh shit, and start story facing at it. Yeah. So anyway, after M is revealed to be Moriarty and he reveals his big plan, he tells him like, "Okay, I'm only telling you this because it's toodaloo." And then fucking Dorian Gray comes in and Marty
Bon voyage.
drops that line and blows up the fucking ship. So then the team eventually survives that, though, and then they get a message from Skinner, who is actually a good guy, and he's actually camped out inside Moriarty's secret Arctic base in Mongolia, and he's just like, "Oi, chaps, I'm over here. I'm seeing what's going on. Come down and stop this shit." Because it turns out what M has been doing is collecting samples of the team members to get their superpowers. So, invisible spies and vampiric assassins and a bunch of hulking, Mr. Hydes and whatnot.
Did he get anything from Alan Quartermain in the movie?
No.
He's just like jerking him off, like, I gotta get that superfood. I'll make a stronger soldier.
Yeah, there's really nothing he gets from him, which is just kind of funny. It's just like, 2/3 of the group, they're just
And
like, whatever, just guys. And you, exactly. So then they eventually go to this, Mongolian snow base, and they confront Moriarty. The big fight breaks out. Dorian Gray gets fucking murked in a pretty cool fight with Mina that ends in like just incredible lines from Dorian Gray.
You're painting.
I hoped I'd get to nail you one more time. Didn't think it'd be literally.
But then, fucking Nimoy and Dr. Hyde, they go save all the scientists that Moriarty captured. And then Alan and Tom Sawyer, they confront Moriarty and they manage to kill him. But then in the process, Alan himself gets killed. And then that's kind of it. They save the day. So they shoot MF Doom in the back of the head with a sniper shot. Sean Connery gets stabbed in the back, literally. And then he dies. And then they have a funeral in Kenya. And the film ends with a fucking shaman doing a whole... Yeah, does he?
Because
so the whole time,
in a throwaway line earlier in the film.
Yep. This is definitely Chekhov's late ass gun. So basically, earlier in the film, he had mentioned that oh, you're pretty. Someone made an offhand comment that, oh, Alan, you're pretty tough. It seems like you can't be killed. And he's just like, oh, well, you see, I saved a witch doctor one time, and then he said, Africa will never let you die, and then that's when they were like, well, you're not African anymore, buddy. So then turns out it's true, except when they come back to his funeral and everyone's just like, oi, you was a good one. And, just kind of saying their goodbyes. Then we get this incredible sequence where after everyone leaves the funeral, this fucking random shaman starts coming out the bush and he starts doing his whole little spiritual dance.
It's pretty like,
and then yeah, real kind of wild shit. And then all of a sudden, lightning bolts strike the rifle that Tom Sawyer had put onto Alan's grave, and then the dirt underneath it starts shaking, and it's like, oh, will he come back? Will he return? And of course not, because this fucking film failed.
After
so
this
yeah,
movie,
that was
Sean
the League of
Connery
Extraordinary Gentlemen.
After this movie, Sean Connery quit acting, so he definitely could not return. Oh my god, that's like the spin-off show that they were gonna do after this, was that he comes back but he's a new person now, he's been reborn and he's young. Self. Yeah.
Yeah, so this I should just begin with a little bit of my backstory of this. When I was a kid,
I got it too.
I thought this was the coolest idea on the fucking planet. Because in case anybody wants to know why I am the way that I am, I knew who all these characters were. When I was a kid, I read King Solomon's Mines. So I knew who Alan Quartermain was. I actually knew who Alan Quartermain was. I had read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Nerd. I read Dorian Gray because I love the Universal Monsters. So it only sort of branched out from there of all this other eventually it went to War of the Worlds, and then I started reading The Time Machine, and then you get to King Solomon's Mines, and it just goes and goes and goes. But anyway, I was obsessed with all these old literary characters, and I thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. I was the one 7-year-old on the planet that was like, Alan Quartermain's gonna team up with Dr. Jekyll and the Invisible Man. Oh my god, it was amazing. I just could not believe it. I was soy facing over it at 7 years old. I just thought it was the coolest idea ever. And you know what? God damn it, it is the coolest idea ever, because the Alan Moore comics, which we haven't even brought up yet, this is based on a comic book series by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, is fucking awesome. It's a great comic book, and it's a cool idea to just bring together all of these classic characters and make them all in one world. This movie doesn't do any of that. This movie is horrible. This movie just, like you said, it's just Marvel name dropping, where it's like, oh my, Dorian Gray is the villain. Oh,
Absolutely, but I won't lie, and I did like feel a little tingle in my nipples when they talked about Mr. Hyde and being like, oh, he's been terrorizing the Rue Morgue for months, and I'm like, Rue Morgue,
okay, not to spoil anything for anybody, but in the Extraordinary Gentleman comics, like, they end up on, like, the island of Dr. Moreau, and then they, like, fight Martians from War of the Worlds, and then, spoiler alert, Mr. Hyde rapes the Invisible Man. What kind of source material this is pulling from? They tried to take all that and turn it into an X-Men ripoff, because they literally marketed this as LXG to try and fool people who didn't know how to use the internet to look up movies yet into thinking that this was some sort of X-Men spin-off. Because it was 2003 and not everybody went on Fandango or Wikipedia yet. Like they still found out about movies from who was on Regis and Kelly in the morning promoting it.
Now, this was Fox at the time, so they were definitely just like riding that X-Men high, and they're just like, hey, we got X2 coming out. What else? We got LXG, and they're just gonna maybe ride that fucking X brand to death. Who knows? But Andy, I have a similar upbringing in the sense of I didn't read King Solomon's Mind because I had friends, but no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Oh God!
You said you wouldn't bring that up, damn it.
But I had this movie basically at the same time that I had Van Helsing, and I am sad to report that I watched that movie a lot too, along with Van Helsing, to the point that the two movies intermingled in my mind as one movie, where I was just mixing them up constantly, where I'm like, oh, that one scene in Van Helsing where the witch doctor appears at the end and revives the girlfriend, right? And then I watch Van Helsing, I'm like, where's the witch doctor at the end? She's just dead?
And this is where Nick drops in the Alvin and the Chipmunks Witch Doctor song.
Oh God! Oh my God!
This is like everything Van Helsing succeeds at, but it fails.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I only just started getting into the Alan Moore comic, which is just fucking leagues ahead of this, because like Andy said, it's like conceptually it's a cool concept, like on paper, right? And turns out, like, when you do it justice, like Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill did, then it actually works really, really well, and it's really dope, and it's truly a shame, because what they do in the books, they don't translate any of that to the screen. Like Andy said, like, there's so much they could have done to really give justice and pay homage to, like, the era of, like, what they're pulling from for all the source material, not just the comic, but I mean, like, what the comic itself pulls, which is all these like Victorian era stories and characters and monsters, and they don't do anything with that. Like Andy said, this is just a bad fucking X-Men ripoff, and especially in stark contrast to Van Helsing, this film looks like shit. We were glazing up Van Helsing left and right for the, like, production value of it and aesthetics of it, and in stark contrast, this film looks so boring. Like, I think you had made an offhanded comment, Marty, earlier about how, like, in Van Helsing, there's no, like, boring gray, like, war zones. You know what I mean? There's nothing, like, bland about that. This movie is nothing but that. You know what I mean? It's nothing but fucking bland ass scenes of, like, these darkly lit cobblestone factories or rooms. The only aesthetically pleasing, like, set and environment that the team, has is, I would argue, the Nautilus, which is Captain Nimoy's ship. That actually looks cool because it's, like, all pristine and porcelain and white and everything like that. Captain Nimoy and his ship being, like, one of the few highlights of this film. But yeah, overall, this film is just so disappointing. I will say this. Normally, I consider myself the certified, kind of normal guy on the podcast. I like to think that I'm not super mired in as much knowledge or nerd shit as, like, the rest of these fine gentlemen here. But I, too, watched this a little bit when I was, younger, when it first came out. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of cool, because I like the concept of it. Upon this rewatch, I'm like, and which is a testament to, I think, Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, but the concept always kind of intrigued me. upon especially this rewatch, this film is so much more like this is so much worse than I thought. Like there's so little of this that's redeeming that I actually like gave a fuck about. So yeah, overall, this just is not good. Just like Andy had said, it's everything Van Helsing did right. This does not.
I was worried for a second, Nick, because I thought you were going to be like, well, like, you know, the Andy over here, I have also read the King Solomon's Mine when I was 7 years old.
No,
like,
no,
Jesus.
no, did not know who the fuck Sean Connery was back then. Still kind of don't now.
Well, let's.
I do want to say, I think I lean out of the three of us on the more favorable towards this movie end, but in the sense of like, yeah, this movie is visually just repelling. There's nothing appealing about it from a visual perspective at all. I mean, like, I get like they were working with like not even like 40% of the budget Van Helsing had, but like you could have shot this a lot better. It is so bland looking. There's no remarkable like, whoa, that was a cool angle or whatever. There's no camera movement. It's just fucking boring. It's shot boringly. There's no color to anything. It's all gray and washed out. And the character designs, there's nothing memorable about any of them.
Oh.
The most memorable character design in the whole movie is, in my opinion, the eviler Mr. Hyde guy at the end, who just looks like a disgusting Red Hulk thing, where he's got like one bigger arm because he's been gooning too long and he's all steamy.
He looks like the Joker when he took too much Titan at the end of Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
But I'll just say this, like, just to wrap up the whole Alan Moore connection. Alan Moore has described the concept of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen as an exploration of a massive planet of fiction that has evolved alongside our world. And basically what he means by that when he goes into it is he views humanity's output of art and fiction as one whole cloud of creativity. And so, you know, even if it's not set in the same universe or whatever, Frankenstein and Dracula and James Bond and Batman and, you know, all the Sherlock Holmes and all these things all exist in this fictional zeitgeist that is because humans' creativity has evolved alongside humanity. And so this world is a way of tracking humanity's progress through the fictional characters and stories that we were coming up with as a result of the culture that we were experiencing at the time. So that was his plan with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and it works. It's really out there, but it works. It is a celebration of humanity's artistic output. That's what it's meant to be, and it's all wrapped up in this actually very entertaining, because a lot of Alan Moore stuff sometimes, you know, it can be a little talkier than people anticipate, or it can, you know, less action than people. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is meant to be an adventure comic. Make no mistake, it's actually one of the more simply written stories that Alan Moore has ever done. It's just very complicated because of all the references he's pulling from. Mm-hmm. But having said that, it's meant to be a celebration of humanity's artistry and fiction. Why they decided to turn this into like a low-rent X-Men ripoff, like, I have no idea. Yeah. Also, final point, is it fair to say that this is the first MCU movie? Because it's an ugly, gray, concrete thing with bad special effects that drops names of characters that they expect you to give a shit about, but you have no idea who they're talking about. This is the first MCU movie.
Yes. 100%. That's why I'm so repelled by it on the rewatch, because whereas Van Helsing, it felt like you know, oh wow, like we don't get movies like this anymore. You know what I mean? It's like things that have been so starved from in most of this like Cape shit and Cape adjacent shit, where it's like, you know, production and set design and things like that. This was just all of the flaws of like most modern Cape shit movies, but just back then with even worse special effects. So I'm like, oh god, this is just horrible. This is hideous. I never escaped the fucking MCU.
Well, we should probably dive into why this is a disaster.
Yes.
And we could put that squarely on the shoulders of Mr. Sean Connery.
Yeah, thanks Mr. Connery.
Yeah, so he ate up most of. Well, let's go back a little bit more. Martin, explain why Sean Connery is even in this piece of shit.
Okay, Mr. Sean Connery was a little pissy that he had said no to The Matrix and to Lord of the Rings, and they made a shit ton of money. So he was like, what IP, what property can I get thrown into? Because my James Bond money has all dried up at this point. What could I possibly do? And Fox is like, hey, Sean Connery, some Fox executive, I'm sure, was just like, hey, let's get James Bond in our movie. Despite the fact that he was James Bond 40 years before this movie came out. They're like, oh, that's going to sell. Yeah, okay, great. Mr. Connery, we hear you want to do a franchise movie. How much do you want? Excuse me? Oh, okay, yeah, sure. We're just going to hire from the fucking casting pool then after that. He ate up $17 million of the $79 million budget of this movie, which ensured,
Jesus.
when you're making an action-adventure special effects bonanza film, that everyone else is going to be cast from the casting pool. You know, they're just going to be like whoever we can get, basically. And it's pretty interesting to note that he clearly had no interest being in the movie. He hated filming it. He shit-talked Stephen Norrington a lot. Acted like a complete fucking diva, basically, on the movie. And yeah, if you ever want to lose respect for an actor, just look up what Sean Connery did while making League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because like you're just like, Jesus Christ, man, grow the fuck up.
Yeah, he almost got into a fist fight with Stephen
Yes.
Norrington.
Yep.
Stephen Norrington didn't even attend the premiere, and I think they asked Sean Connery where the director was, and he goes, "Oh, check the local asylum." Now, I'll say this movie is not good, but I think I may have even mentioned this on a previous episode. It might have been the Blade episode, where I said, like, yeah, this movie's not good, but you try working with late career Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And tell me how good the movie's going to turn out.
Yeah.
Because this is really rough, but I don't think it's Stephen Norrington's fault. Having said that, I don't think Stephen Norrington is the right choice for a movie like this. You need a little more scaled back traditional director for something that's dealing with this subject matter. And I can't pull an example off the top of my head.
Well,
I'm sorry, but yeah.
If you're going to get Stephen Norrington for a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie, you should make a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie that feels like the comic book then a little bit more. Not trying to be the next blockbuster franchise, because it's not what this property is, you know? This is what that property is through a hack executive's eyes, honestly. This is like what one guy who had like a major boner for this concept went for, and he's just like, oh, this can be my X-Men for Fox. This is what I can do for them. This is what that feels like. This feels like some executive at Fox was really pushing for this and just completely just like, yeah, we're going to get Sean Connery in this. The guy that did Blade, yeah, he's going to do it. We got a comic book writer, so it's going to be great, and it's going to be just like the comics, right? No. So.
You know what it feels like? It feels like the pilot for a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen show that never happened, that you would buy bootleg at Frankenson's 10 years later, and you would pop that pirated DVD into your player in 2012 and watch it and be like, Jesus Christ, I could see why this never happened.
Yeah. And that's not to take away, by the way, when I say like from the casting pool, that's not to take away from some of the other actors, because some of them didn't really go on to do much. Like I know I love the Dorian Gray actor in this. He hasn't done a whole lot since. But fucking, what's his face? Mr. Jason Fleming, who plays Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in this movie. I really like him. He's a great character actor. He's popped up in so much shit. So we talked about Solomon Kane earlier before recording.
He was
in that. So he's in that. He's in the fucking Alfred Pennyworth show, and he's like a great villain in that show. So hey, there's a good reason to watch that fucking thing. And then of course you got Mr. Richard Roxburgh as the fucking James Moriarty guy, and he's just chewing that scenery, especially as the Phantom, where he's just putting on his Dracula voice.
So I think it'd be quick. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there are some things about this that I like enjoyed, or wasn't too bad. So I'll just briefly go through that because there's so much more worse that I want to get into. Of the few highlights of this film, one, I think that Captain Nimoy and the Nautilus, his ship, and he's played by Nasir-Uddin Shah. I thought he was fantastic. I think he looks the best out of all the characters. I think he looks the best and most accurate to the comics. He's also like pretty badass. I loved his like martial arts he was doing along with his like swashbuckling. Yeah. That was cool. Like I said, the Nautilus is literally the only memorable set on this entire fucking movie. The pristine white, the ship looks cool, the blade of the sea and all that kind of stuff. I really enjoyed that. like Marty was saying, fuck Sean Connery, but like everybody else of the team, like there's like some really enjoyable stuff.
Yeah.
Stuart Townsend's Dorian Gray is fantastic. He, much like Richard Roxburgh's Dracula, he is just chewing up the scene. He is so over the top. He's dropping one-liners that, again, if you take it seriously, very corny and cheesy. But like if you just embrace it, because he's just this ancient, Victorian ghoul. If you just embrace the theatrics of it, he's fucking fantastic. I love his like stupid little one-liners he drops. They're great.
Growl.
Exactly. Like that, or Bon Voyage, or when he has his fight with Mina Harker at the end, and he's just like, I always wanted to nail it to the bed again. I didn't think literally. Like it's fun. It's scene chewing. It's fun.
Yeah.
On that, Peter Wilson, who plays Mina Harker, I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought her performance was great for her character. I think she really brings that kind of caged beast under like a like more subtle performance for her, because she's like a very kind of like timid woman, but then the beast comes out and she's just like this vicious blood-sucking vampire. So I thought she was really, really fantastic. I loved when she first drank blood for the first time, and she's like almost in ecstasy, the way she's like licking the blood off of her like gloves on her fingers. I thought it was great. And then Jason Fleming's Dr. Henry Jekyll, I thought he was great in this, honestly. We how fucking atrocious I think Mr. Hyde looks, but as like the character, like Dr. Jekyll, I thought he was great. I thought Jason Fleming did
It's interesting because you have Sean Connery in the center, and obviously they're the one that he's the one that they're all expecting to be fucking A game, the best of the best, and he's giving the worst fucking performance in this movie. Meanwhile, everyone else around him is either hamming it up because that's what they're really good at, or they're giving really great performances because they're like, this is my big break, basically. This is my first big studio movie. I have to try.
Yeah, this is going to be the next X-Men. Right. I have to do good at this. Like, it's funny. Well, first off, Mr. Hyde, his little legs always make me laugh. Like, it's human legs, and then this giant foam thing on the top. Also, when they first meet him, like his top hat is really funny, and his cane, and he's like prancing across the streets of London.
And I love that the top hat is made to fit his Mr. Hyde size head.
Yeah, because in the comic, again, he's like Hulk size, and he has like certain healing properties and stuff like that. He's also a rapist. There's a lot of rapists in that comic, just so you know. Like,
you're supposed to root for this Mr. Hyde, so there's none of that. They just mentioned, he's just been terrorizing the Rue Morgue for the last few months.
Yeah,
he learns the error of his ways in the comic by doing it to someone even worse than him.
Yeah.
There's one actor I wanted to briefly mention real quick. Mr. fucking who plays fucking Rodney Skinner, Mr. Tony Curran. He's popped up in a lot of cool things, but most of note that I feel is in keeping with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Van Helsing is that he played Michael I think it was, not Michael, one of the fucking evil brothers, the vampire brother in the second Underworld movie. He's the one that turns into the big monster thing. So.
Oh yeah, that's right, huh? Okay.
He rocks. I love him in this, and I love him in that too.
He was another Skinner. Honestly a highlight.
Yep.
In comparison to what's his name, Friar Carl in Van Helsing, and I normally like the actor that plays him. His name escaped me at this time. It was fucking David Wenham. I usually like David Wenham. Like in most stuff, he has a great voice, but I did not enjoy him as a comedic relief in Van Helsing at all. But I think that honestly. I think honestly, Tony Curran's Skinner character, I thought he was great for like what he was, as like a cheeky kind of like rogue. I think he like works a lot better in this. But
not
on the note,
but as an invisible man,
invisible man, yes, important to note.
Because they couldn't get the rights to H.G. Wells as the Invisible Man, so he's just an Invisible Man. Yes. Which, you know what? That's fine. There's not much.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the topic of Mr. Hyde, real quick, because this is one of my biggest like hobby horses about this film. Yeah, he looks like utter dog shit. It's just this ridiculous foam suit that they have
Shaved head.
Jason Fleming in.
Yeah.
Shaved head, and these big like because they were going for like, oh, we want to give him like massive fucking gorilla arms. Instead, what they do, in addition to the ridiculous Hulk makeup, where he has this giant hunchback for some fucking reason, and then his hands, instead of giving you the impression these are big hulking strong arms and hands, it looks like he just has fucking like diabetes or something like that. Like they're all swollen and like he looked pudgy. Like he just has a giant hot dog for like a hand. It looks ridiculous. And I think, funny enough, the to Marty's point, I think the not Red Hulk guy at the end, I think he looks a lot better. The CGI looks bad, but like his design is a lot better at least than fucking whatever we got for. Yeah, way better than whatever the fuck we got for Mr. Hyde. So I can't stand it, especially in contrast to the Van Helsing design, which is in comparison leagues ahead of this one. No pun intended. You know what I mean? He's just this giant, massive brute, but he looks like proportional. You know.
In stark contrast to the Frankenstein point that I made with Van Helsing, this is one of the few times where, even though it would have looked like shit, like they probably should have just gone CGI with this. Like, because whatever practical effects they whipped up look like crap. And the thing is with the way that Mr. Hyde is in the comics,
yes,
he kind of he's the Hulk of that team. He's the big brutish, he's the Thing, he's the Hulk, he's Beast / Colossus, whatever. You know, the big brutish muscle of the team.
But he looks better. He like what I like about the comics. Just to kind of wrap the point, what I appreciate about the Alan Moore interpretation of the character is that he's supposed to be the big man of the group, right? Because every superhero team needs that. But what I love is that they made him like this beast in the sense that he's this giant ape man. You know, this funny because the film makes the point to Tom Sawyer's character throws out a line of like, you know, is that a man or an ape or some shit like that? And in the comics that would make sense because Hyde is literally a giant gorilla man with huge overly pronounced canine teeth and like kind of like that stubby ape nose, and like he looks like a fucking gorilla, and it looks so sick. But then in this film it's just Jason Fleming in a giant foam hunchback suit with big old like, you know, inflated diabetes arms and these tiny little legs that he's pouncing around on. It looks fucking stupid, man.
I cracked up so hard that what came up in my Instagram reels this week was from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where it's like your friend in 2010 downing a Four Loko, and it's just, no, not the whole thing.
Did you send that to me on Instagram? I feel like you did.
I did.
Yeah. No. Yeah. There is no, and we always champion practical effects on this show. Yeah. We always champion practical effects. There's no defending this. There's absolutely no defending.
No, it's so
like
bad.
It's like the worst thing ever. I will say it is character-wise still better than Russell Crowe in The Mummy 2017.
Yes.
Right.
Oh god.
As an actual characterization. But we'll get to the Mr. Hyde comparison after we wrap up the discussion of the film itself.
Cool.
That'll be our outro.
Who's the Hydiest?
Last point then. Yeah, who was the Hydiest? My very last point, like my other big hobby horse of this film, because there's so much like little shit to you know kind of ding it for. We already talked about the aesthetics, but for me, it's specifically the fact that this film doesn't feel like a fucking adventure. You know, Van Helsing takes place within like maybe 2 countries, but fucking League of Extraordinary Gentlemen takes place across almost the entire globe, and it feels like they shot in 2 spots. That's it. You know what I mean? So on that sin, I truly have to say this film can go fuck itself. You know.
I'm sorry.
Still laugh.
Too much.
Because your point is completely valid. You're like, this doesn't feel like a film or like an adventure. Well, it does feel like a film, but it also doesn't feel like a rollicking adventure. But I'm still laughing because who's the Heidi? Like into the Hyde-verse.
Into the Hyde-verse.
Oh my god.
And then they get this is a deep cut, and you know that I'm an actual fan of this shit because I actually know that this happened. You even get the guy from the NBC show Do No Harm, which was the modern retelling of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde about a brain surgeon with fucking an alternate personality.
What's wrong with you?
Jesus.
Into the Heidiverse.
Into the Heidiverse. Are you more Heidi? Yeah. I don't know, how many people did you rape? I don't remember.
Dr. Jekyll, no way Hyde. There we go.
No way to hide.
Yeah. You can't hide. That's what it is. So it would be, and somehow we get Tom Cruise in there too.
This season on the CW, you can't hide.
You know what we get?
Oh, man.
We get Tom Cruise, Hugh Jackman, and an AI recreated Sean Connery to be the protagonist of the Mr. Hyde universe film. And they're all like, "You've had to fight this Mr. Hyde before too, have you?" And Sean Connery's like, "Fuck you." And he's like slapping around a woman as they're talking.
Remember, open palm, never a closed fist. Oh, Mr. Connery.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Because you say Into the Hydeverse, and I just think of this Mr. Hyde from League, just like with his stupid gorilla arm, just like falling through the fucking portals and shit.
I like the idea that even an AI generated Sean Connery can't be made to give a shit about this role. You couldn't program a computer to pretend that Sean Connery would care. But yeah, just okay. So I don't know how we really want to wrap this up. It's a big turd. It's a waste of time. It's completely misinformed. It's a complete misfire. There might be a few good things from actors giving it their all, but overall there's nothing worth returning to in this. It's a big turd.
Yeah. Surprisingly, very successfully financially. I don't know how, but it was.
Yeah.
Because this was 2003, and anything would make money back then.
Exactly. I think this.
You underestimate all the King Solomon's Mines fans that were out there that were just chomping at the bit for Alan Quartermain to be seen back on the big screen after it had been years, and I have this right here, after it had been years since the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer King Solomon's Mines that came out in the 1950s.
Come on, my Alan Quartermainers, let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, the Quartermainers truly outnumbered the Helsing heads 2-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was this more successful overall than Van Helsing?
Like,
as far as was this more successul than Van Helsing in terms of what they spent versus what they made?
Yes. Well, because Van Helsing, they spent 170 and made 300 at the box office. This cost 78 million and made 179 million at the box office, plus another 85 million on home video. So.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it made a good fucking profit despite being what it is. So that is very surprising. Good for y'all. It was coincidentally enough cost the same amount as Daredevil and made the same amount too. So the more you know. Life's got little coincidences. It came out the same year too. How about that?
From the same studio.
From the same studio. How about that?
Oh yeah. One thing I would be super fucking remiss to not mention. It's one of the very few highlights of this film, and it's just another just crown to throw on top of the head of Van Helsing, because that movie's a banger. That incredible intro sequence in Van Helsing, you had the Universal logo. It shows like the planet spinning, and then that turns into like a ball of fire that becomes like the torch of one of the villagers in the beginning of the film. And then in this film, the 20th Century Fox logo transitions into like just like a logo like printed on the back of like some factory in like the middle of like London when the film first opens up. But yeah, just to kind of wrap our discussion, I would say these two films serve as a great duality between one, like the Cape shit adjacent films that were coming out and continue to come out. I think they're great examples, both good and then a very bad example of how to do that Victorian cloak shit. You know what I mean? If you're going to do a more actiony interpretation, more adventurous interpretation of these literary characters of this Victorian-esque era, I think they're a great example of what to do in the case of Van Helsing and what not to do. And then also I think a good and bad omen of what we could expect moving forward, because you had the Kino that is Van Helsing, and that was a financial like flop. And then you had the absolute dog shit that is The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that was a financial success for some ungodly reason. And now we're living in the wake of that, and all of the kind of films that come out after that. I would argue, and we'll get into it as we go further in the season, all the really good bangers, most of the time, but most of the good bangers that we get of Victorian cloak shit or of the superhero adjacent stuff that's not quite MCU or DCU stuff, I think you'll see that there's a trend where the really good shit tends not to do great, despite on a second run back, it's actually like, wow, there's so much more merit to this. While as the other stuff that we're like, wow, that was horrendous dog shit, tends to do really fucking well, especially in the aftermarket on DVDs and home videos. So yeah, it's just a good, I guess, preview of what's to come from both the era and the show.
Yeah.
It was a good way to
I agree.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's unfortunate that Van Helsing didn't make $1 billion like it should have, like it deserved to, and we don't have a Helsing trilogy. But you know what? I'll take the lick that like this is literally for me a 5 out of 5 blockbuster movie. This is so much fucking
It's
fun.
great.
I am going to watch this way more than I am ever going to watch any other fucking Universal Dark Universe movie that we talked about outside of the Wolfman 2010. I will watch that again. I'll watch this before I watch League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I don't even fucking hate that movie as much as these guys do. I am so happy that that movie exists, the way that it is, how it is. I wouldn't change a damn thing about it, except maybe the werewolf stuff for Andy's sake, you know, make him happier. Outside of that,
Thank you.
It's just for Andy. Outside of that, it's a bummer it didn't do as well. It's still a great movie. I'm happy we have it. I don't think I know they're talking about a Van Helsing show like literally a month ago, but I'm fairly certain that's just going to be completely unrelated, like every other Van Helsing property since then has been. I know there's been a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen show that's been in development hell since I think pre-COVID, so that's probably not happening anymore.
It ain't happening.
I hope not.
Yeah, it's been in development hell. It's probably not ever going to happen ever again. Do you think we are ever going to go back to a period where we adapt these kind of characters? And by that I mean in more the League sense of like these King Solomon's Mine, Invisible. Well, we've done the Invisible Man, I suppose. But do you think like we're ever going to get another Mr. Hyde film at some point or anything along those lines?
It's a good thing you brought up the Invisible Man, because I think yes, but I think it will be along the lines of Lee Wannell's Invisible Man, where it will sort of be in name and concept only, and it will be people just sort of doing their own thing with it. In so much as like Karin Kusama was going to do Dracula, but it was going to be set in modern day in Los Angeles. It's more the concept and less like we're going to adapt the H.G. Wells novel. Like they're not going to be adapting the Robert Louis Stevenson novel. But yes, I could easily see them bringing back Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in some form in film.
You know
at
what?
Some point.
Hey, you know what, Blumhouse? Give a bunch of filmmakers that want to do their own weird thing with some old public domain IP, like $10 million. Let them go do an actual Dr. Moreau movie. Let them go do a fucking Dr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde film. Just throw out a couple mil to these filmmakers to let them take their own spin on these properties that are not going to be in blockbusters anymore, especially post The Mummy 2017. So. Hey, the sky's the limit. Give Mick Garris money to go make The Mummy, goddammit. We've already talked about this last time, but damn it, we still got to do it.
We say that on every episode, but goddammit, give it his money. Just do it already. You have the script. No. It's... These characters are never going to go away. Frankenstein's never going to go away. And I mean, even though it's kind of silly to say this, like Alan Quatermain's never going to go away. Like King Solomon's Mines is the genesis of the Lost Civilization adventure stories. Right. Like you don't have Indiana Jones without King Solomon's Mines. I could see we're this close to them saying like, if an announcement came tomorrow that said like, Martin Scorsese wants to adapt King Solomon's Mines, you'd be like, all right, like, let's do it. But it's going to take something like that. You know what I mean? Because it's going to take someone who wants to do... At the end of the day, we are sort of returning to a more classic Hollywood system in a way where people want big, gigantic, but good event movies to go to. Like Avatar: The Way of Water just made a shit ton of money. Various... Oppenheimer... for example, Dune, exactly. So it's not they're going to be adapting Blood Meridian. Not that I expect that to make $1 billion, but it wouldn't take much to get the public behind some of this stuff. But it would take someone like Christopher Nolan or Paul Thomas Anderson or Martin Scorsese or Denis Villeneuve adapting this stuff. What is gone is the era of crapping out action movies with these titles slapped on them.
Yeah.
Like that Taron Egerton Robin Hood was like 15 years too late.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like that would have probably done some okay money in 2004, but because it came out in whatever fucking 2018, nobody gives a shit about Robin Hood Begins.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So it'll take the stuff will endure, but I think it will go back to being a little bit rarer and a little bit more prestigious and less. And again, that's why this stuff failed, is because they're trying to do Matrix action movies with fucking Alan Quartermain. It's just two things don't mix.
Just think of that CG shot of him shooting that bullet and going across to hit that guy in Africa. Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's probably the way that they're going to go about it going forward. I'm excited. I'm hoping that they pick it up along the way. I hope A24 maybe takes a swing at some of this stuff because they're kind of IP hungry right now. So maybe they'll do something with like that. Fuck it, go for it, man. Experiment a little bit. Now, having said all of this, who is the Heidiest Hyde?
At the end of the day,
I think.
Go, Nick, go.
I was just gonna say, I think the Heidi should go to the Van Helsing one. Of these three, I think unquestionably should go to it. We get the big ogreish, brutish gorilla man thing going on, including like him literally swinging on like beams of like the tower that they're in, like a gorilla. We get a nice shot of him like with his pants like kind of dragging behind, so we see a big old butt crack, and he like scratches it. Like that was great. And then he does that whole sequence like Marty alluded to earlier with the cigar, where he like blows a ring in Van Helsing's face, licks the cigar out and puts that on his tongue and eats it. Like he's just a big fucking ape. You know what I mean? He's so good in the brief time that we get him in Van Helsing. But I think the worst, it's actually not, despite the costume design being horrific, it's actually not. I think the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I think it's actually Russell Crowe's Mr. Hyde. I think he's objectively dog shit. Like it's just like alcoholic Russell Crowe doing like a really weird Cockney accent. That's it.
This is the Russell Crowe that thankfully has gotten better in recent years, but this is the one from the period of like 2015 to 2020 where he was just drinking a lot and just doing whatever role he was given. Like if you've ever seen Unhinged, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I agree that Russell Crowe's is the worst. I think on principle his is the worst too, because the principle of why he's in that movie is so embarrassing and so cynical. What are you
talking about? Prodigium. We'll never forget Prodigium.
Prodigium.
He has no character. He has no purpose for being in there other than setting up the cinematic universe, and he's also bad in it. So it's all around bad. I think the Heidiest. I think the Heidiest Hyde. I think has to go to Jason Fleming in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because that dude put in the work. That dude wore that stupid shit. And also, that Hyde has the most character. He actually likes to help out at the end.
True. He's a big, nice guy.
He's a big, nice, reformed rapist. I've learned the error of my ways. after working with a completely unenthusiastic Alan Quartermain and an Invisible Man.
An Invisible Man. Yeah. Where is he, by the way? You don't need to know about that.
Yeah. What's he off doing? And why do we hear women screaming? Again, read the Alan Moore comic. These are all the worst people you've ever read about.
Well,
oh yeah.
I think I'm going to have to be the tiebreaker, and I'm sure Andy knows exactly where I'm going to go with this. I'm going to have to give the Heidi, which in this case is an empty Big Mac box, to Mr. Hyde in 2004's Van Helsing. for the
Yeah.
for the murder of 12 men, 6 women, 4 children, 3 goats, and a rather nasty massacre of poultry. Here you go, the Heidi.
You're getting a box with about as much substance in it as Russell Crowe's portrayal of your character.
It's empty, so.
Yeah. And with that, with that, it's time for us to go back up into our towers in the Rue Morgue or wherever the fuck he was hiding.
He needs to go back to his hidey hole.
Yeah, we have to go back to our hidey holes, because that is the end of this episode of Heroic Efforts. We thank you all for joining us. As always, you can follow me at _superguy on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow Martin at
Only McFisherman on Twitter, and you can go buy my book, Tales Under the Blood Moon, or buy Andy's book, What We Find Back Home.
Yes, both available on Amazon now. And where can the people find you, Nick?
You can catch me on Instagram at MonteNix or on Twitter at Nick Talamante. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of Heroic Efforts. Be sure to tune in next time for our next episode, where we're going to continue this kind of trend, exploring a little more expanded cape shit adjacent stuff as we kind of teeter into more of this Victorian era cloak shit and more kind of spooky-esque characters. So please stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please go watch Van Helsing again. It's fucking fantastic. Go read the Alan Moore League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comic book. It's fantastic. And never, for the love of God, watch this god-awful movie LXG ever again. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody, and peace.
See y'all later. See y'all next time. I did buy the Van Helsing comic. Good night.